Emily, I cannot believe this, gasped Rachel, her eyes widening in shock. Why aren't you asking Daniel about this trip? Do you really think he'll be okay with it? Won't he be upset? Especially considering you'll be the only married woman with a bunch of singles. You know, Carol and Peggy, they'll probably start fornicating with someone the moment we land in Vegas. Emily was pretty upset when she spoke about asking someone, likely her husband. She seemed really frustrated, saying things like he'd ever say no. She felt tired of someone being too good all the time. Emily said she wasn't planning to cheat but wanted a break because her life felt dull and lacked excitement. Her friend Rachel seemed worried and cautioned her to be careful, fearing her marriage might suffer because of this trip. Marriage, Emily scoffed. What Daniel and I have is far from passionate. We've been together for over 21 years and I've never seen him truly passionate about anything. It's like living with Mr. Whitebread. What's wrong with you, Em? I thought you loved him. Why so bitter? Daniel is the nicest man I know, Rachel exclaimed. Emily sighed heavily. I do love him, but I'm tired of living with Mr. Perfect. He never gets upset, avoids conflicts, and won't stand up for himself. It's like he lets people walk all over him. Remember the New Year's Eve party? Gregory Thompson was picking a fight with Daniel, calling him a coward. Daniel just walked away. You should have stood up for himself, but he didn't. I started wondering if he really is a coward. Rachel noticed Emily was upset and tried to console her. Talk to him, Rachel suggested. Try to make him more assertive. Emily sighed and replied, I've tried, wretch, 1,000 times. He just believes violence doesn't solve anything. I get so frustrated with him. She tried to put on a smile and continued, that's why I need to get away for a while. Besides, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? Rachel forced a smile back but couldn't shake off a sense of unease for her friend's emotional state. Daniel Parker was undeniably a nice guy, standing at a little over 6 feet, 4 inches and weighing around pound 260. He maintained his trim and fit physique through early morning runs and regular workouts. His journey into adulthood began with joining the U.S. Navy straight out of high school due to financial constraints. Serving in the Navy for 4 years paved the way for him to realize his dream, admission to university. Upon being admitted, Daniel pursued a major in finance and accounting. Driven by a serious commitment to his studies, despite being older than his classmates, he approached his education with determination, eschewing, frolicking, and carousing. His Navy experience was behind him and he focused on achieving the best possible grades. In the beginning of his junior year, Daniel's life took an unexpected turn when he crossed paths with Emily Anderson. A mutual friend introduced them in the bustling student cafeteria where they began sharing lunches. Daniel felt a sense of ease and fascination around Emily. She stood at a modest 5 feet 6 inches, a striking figure with her short dark hair and her eyes a deep blue shimmered with enthusiasm and energy. After Emily gave Daniel her telephone number, he called her, leading to casual dates at first. Both seemed to be navigating the uncertain waters of a burgeoning relationship. But it didn't take long for them to become an item. One evening after dinner and driving back to the dorms, Daniel steered the car into a local park and turned off the engine. Turning to Emily, Daniel began in a halting manner. Look, I want to talk to you. Just talk, Daniel, she replied with a question in her eyes. Oh yeah, look, we've been dating a few months now, and I want and need to tell you how I feel. Just sat and waited, a twinkle in her eyes. Aw, this is tough, Daniel muttered, feeling uncertain. I love you and I want to marry you, he blurted out, his face reddening. Emily looked at him, puzzled. Emily, how do you know? She murmured. We've never done more than kiss and hold hands. How can you be sure that you love me? Daniel looked at her, a hint of surprise on his face. I respect you, I would never try to take advantage of you. Why would I treat you like someone less than you are? He replied. Someone less than what? She exclaimed. What makes you think that intimacy between two people who care for each other makes one lesser? Daniel, I'm not sure that you love me. I think you want a girl who is like Mother Teresa, not one with blood in her veins. Emily sat back with a frustrated look on her face. Daniel raised his hands in a gesture of self-defense. Wait, wait, he protested. That's not so. It's just that I've been in the Navy for 4 years and the girls we came into contact with were not exactly college types. I just wanted to make sure that I treated you as you should be treated. He hesitated and spoke again softly. I do love you, Emily Anderson. I want you to be my wife. I want to be with you for the rest of my life. Teared up and reached for him. Oh, Daniel, I do love you. You're the sweetest, most considerate and compassionate person I've ever met. Yes, I'll marry you. They kissed passionately and right there in the back seat made love. Emily graduated with a marketing degree and landed a job at a local cosmetics company. She started with a training period before getting her own territory. The salary offered was unexpectedly generous, which surprised her. Meanwhile, Daniel still had a year left to finish his degree. Despite this, they didn't want to delay their plans and got married shortly after. They were able to get a small apartment near the university. Em worked and Daniel studied, and it seemed to work well. After graduation, Daniel was also able to gain employment in the area as a junior accountant. And with both salaries, they had little financial concerns. When Emily became pregnant a year later, they decided that she would take maternity leave and then return to work after securing adequate daycare. Actually, Emily had decided Daniel went along with her. She delivered a daughter that they both doted on, especially due to the fact that there were complications in the delivery and Em would not be able to have any additional children. They were both heartbroken, but were thankful for their daughter, Amanda. Both continued to do well in their professions, and money was never a worry. With their earnings combined, they managed to buy a spacious house in a gated community featuring a golf course and country club. When Amanda turned 12, Emily chose to leave her job and become a full-time mother, a decision Daniel fully supported. Meanwhile, Daniel thrived in his career, and after more than 20 years, he reached the position of senior account manager, enjoying a comfortable salary. Then a few weeks ago, a vice presidency became available and Daniel applied for it. He was fairly confident, for he knew that he was more than capable of filling the opening. A few days later, Mark Johnson, CEO, called Daniel into his office. "Daniel, good to see you. Please have a seat. Make yourself comfortable. Coffee?" he inquired. "No thanks, Mark. I'm fine," Daniel answered, eyeing him closely. He felt that this wasn't going to be good news. "Daniel, let me be frank with you. I know that you applied for the VP spot. I have to be upfront with you. You're not going to get it despite the fact that you're smart and capable." Daniel swallowed his anger. "Okay, Mark, continue with your frankness. Let me know why." Johnson smiled gently. "Daniel, it's just that you're too decent a person. I don't think that anyone in this organization has ever worked with someone like you. You're extremely knowledgeable, considerate, very easy to work with, and kind to everyone with whom you come into contact. You are very valuable to us because of the high admiration our clients have for you." Daniel insisted. "That's one reason why we want you to stay in your current role." Mark hesitated before continuing. "There's another aspect though," Jillian leaned in, stating, "You deserve to know. It's about your approach, Daniel. You're too kind. You lack the competitive edge. You need to know when to seize opportunities aggressively. If there's one area in which you don't shine, it's in negotiations. Let's not kid ourselves. You know that I'm right." Daniel nodded in return. He knew that Johnson was correct. It wasn't that he didn't have that so-called ability. It was that he chose not to travel that road. He didn't want to go for any jugglers. He had had enough of that. He rose, shook Johnson's hand, and left. He would have to tell Emily that the position was not his. She would not be surprised. She knew Daniel. Daniel sat at his desk, his gaze fixed on the view outside the window. In that moment, a rare introspection took hold of him, prompting him to reconsider the persona he had deliberately adopted after his discharge from the Navy. Years had passed since he made a conscious decision to mold himself into the person he had become. Daniel had resolved to distance himself from violence in all its forms, whether physical or verbal. He even took care to eliminate any traces of aggression from his newfound personality. This transformation wasn't particularly challenging for Daniel. Fundamentally, he was a genuinely kind person. However, beneath the surface, there lingered a dark side that he was determined never to let resurface. Now, however, he found himself questioning the extent to which he had embraced the other extreme of that persona. His mind drifted back to his years in the Navy, to the grueling training sessions during the dark hours on the cold, wet beaches at Coronado and underwater at San Clemente, places where nobody could hear you scream. It sounds like Daniel's recalling some intense experiences, sneaking along enemy beaches, silently dealing with moving vessels at sea, and patiently waiting in murky swamplands for hours or days. His training seemed exhaustive, honing his ability to neutralize threats effectively. Whether using a knife, a groat, or various bare-handed methods, he had become proficient at eliminating threats stealthily. For more than 3.5 years, he served as a Navy SEAL, functioning as a well-honed killing machine. Iraq, Afghanistan. He was there. Darkness of the night was his realm. His hands never shake, no emotions and no remorse. His kill count was legendary. His brothers in arms were ready to kill and follow him to hell as he approached the end of his enlistment. He felt the weight of the toll it had taken on him. Daniel was aware that he was heading towards a breakdown and felt grateful when his enlistment finally concluded. He made a solemn vow never to let that dark and lethal side of him resurface again. But now, he wondered, had he gone too far? He didn't know now if he fully agreed with Mark Johnson. He didn't seem tough enough for the VP role because he decided not to act that way. if he fully agreed with Mark Johnson. He didn't seem tough enough for the VP role because he decided not to act that way. He thought he had reached the highest point in his job. He felt he'd stay in the same job he had now. But was he starting to have some doubts about how he acted at work? He wasn't excited about talking to Emily about his chat with Johnson. He knew that the last few years of their marriage were not exactly happy ones. Emily often seemed abrupt and snappish. She had adopted a habit of criticizing him and at times seemed almost contemptuous. He knew that he often had to control his temper and walk away from a possible confrontation. They seemed to have drifted apart. Daniel's mind wandered back to the New Year's party when he had almost lost it. "Hey Daniel," slurred a half-drunk Gregory Thompson. "How's my boy Daniel? Did you grow some balls yet?" laughed Thompson from his height of 6 feet, 5 inches. Daniel had stood very still and just stared at Thompson while Emily just stood and kept her eyes on Daniel. "That's okay, Daniel," continued Thompson condescendingly. "We know that you don't like getting hurt." He then laughed uproariously as Daniel turned and walked away. The scene at home later that night was not pleasant. Emily couldn't wait to confront him. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she asked. "How can you let that ass make a fool of you? He made you look like some sort of wimp. Why didn't you defend yourself?" "What would you have me do, Emily?" Daniel asked wearily. "Would it have been better if I had attacked him physically? Would a clever bit of repartee been more appropriate? He was sloshed and I didn't want to make a scene." "Let it go." Emily looked at him scornfully and snapped. "So it's better that you look like a coward. Sometimes I wonder about you." She then turned and stalked out of the room. Neither slept well that night. Daniel's thoughts lingered on the present situation. It went beyond that one night. Something was amiss in their marriage. Emily seemed consistently dismissive and the intimacy between them had dwindled to non-existence. Daniel felt a growing disconnection, especially as Emily's disinterest was a turn-off. Who wanted to make love to someone seemingly uninterested? As Daniel approached a crossroads in his life, Daniel felt puzzled and worried. The strong front he'd maintained for so long was showing signs of weakness, making him unsure about what to do next. Trying to push these concerns aside for a moment, he discussed his talk with John Cook with Emily after they finished dinner. When Daniel shared the conversation details, Emily seemed dismissive and snapped back, saying she wasn't surprised at all. Emily then casually mentioned that she and her friends were flying to Vegas for a long weekend, turning her attention back to a mundane TV show. Daniel, taken aback, asked, "What girls? Shouldn't we have discussed this before you committed?" Emily impatiently replied, "It's Rachel, Carol, Peggy and me. We're going to have some fun. Don't make a big deal out of it." Daniel pressed further, expressing his concerns. "Aren't they all single? Is this trip appropriate?" Emily abruptly turned off the TV, snapped at him. "Yes, it's entirely appropriate. I'll do what I want," she retorted before leaving for the bedroom, the tension palpable. Feeling a sense of things slipping out of control, Daniel sighed. He feared that things might worsen before any chance of improvement. Later that day, upon returning home, he found Emily's suitcase, a stark reminder of her upcoming Vegas trip. Curiosity getting the better of him, he opened it and found new provocative lingerie with tags from Victoria's Secret. Items she hadn't purchased or worn in ages. Unbeknownst to Daniel, the cracks in his persona were growing larger. "Dinner's ready," Emily called, breaking the silence. Daniel brought down the suitcase and eventually asked where she would be staying. Emily, seemingly caught off guard, replied, "I will be at the Rio, but don't call there. Just use my cell if you need to reach me. I'll have it on." Daniel nodded, knowing what he needed to do. Daniel woke up early on that Friday morning, quietly getting ready for work without disturbing Emily. He reached his office well before others, settling at his desk with a determined resolve. "Enough messing around. Time to start calling in favors," he muttered to himself as he picked up the phone. "Venetian, how can I direct your call?" A female voice greeted Mark Johnson. "Please, I'm not sure if the chief is in yet. Would you like to leave a message?" the voice replied. "Try him anyway," Daniel insisted. The phone was answered after just one ring. Johnson, a deep voice responded. "Hi Mark, this is Daniel Parker." Daniel spoke softly into the handset. A brief pause followed. "Daniel, it's been quite a few years. How the hell are you?" "I need a favor, Mark," Daniel said, providing Johnson with the details of his situation. "I don't care what hotel she told you, Tim. We'll find them and we'll keep you posted. They won't be able to take a piss without us knowing it. I'll be getting back to you periodically," Johnson assured him. Johnson took a pause, his voice softening as he spoke. "Daniel, I apologize deeply. You deserve much more than this. Always remember, no matter what, I'm here for you. Seals never, ever forget their own." Daniel felt a wave of relief hearing those words, nodding his thanks as he gently placed the phone back on its cradle. It was a brief respite from his troubles. Mark Johnson, the head of security at the Venetian, held a network of connections that spread across the city's other hotel security chiefs. Daniel trusted in Mark's assurance, knowing that when Mark made a promise, he followed through without fail. Daniel had spent quite a few hours during the past week considering the course of action he contemplated. He had weighed the negatives and the potential for success. He had made voluminous notes and did spreadsheets. He saw little downside. He was more than confident, and he had made the decision to proceed. Reaching for the phone again, he punched in a long-distance number. "Hello, Simon," a female voice answered. "Sam Carola, please." "Mr. Chiarello's office," another female voice answered. "Mr. Foster, please tell him it's Daniel Parker." "I'm sorry, Mr. Foster is not taking calls at the present. Can you tell me what this is in reference to, honey?" Daniel replied softly. "If Sam isn't on this line in 2 minutes, your job might just disappear. Just tell him that Daniel Parker wants him and do it now." There was silence on the line, and he heard the phone being placed on a hard surface. Daniel didn't have to wait long. "Daniel, you son of a bitch, I should be mad as hell at you. You promised to stay connected, but it's been, what, nearly 8 whole years. I should give you a good punch for that. How have you been holding up? Fill me in on what's been going on in your life." "Whoa there, Sam, take it easy. I've been grinding away in the corporate world. Just didn't soar to the heights you did." Daniel chuckled in response. "Seriously though, it's great to hear from you, Daniel. I really mean it. It's been way too long. We've got to keep in touch, all of us. We were like a family." Sam's voice carried a sense of emotion that struck a chord with Daniel, bringing a lump to his throat. "You're right, Sam. I think that we should take some steps to organize that, but first I need a favor. It's money, Sam. I need some money." "Shit, is that all? Tell me how much and where to send it," Sam roared into the phone. "I don't know how much yet," and Daniel outlined his plans to Sam Chiarello. "Okay, Daniel, I'll establish a line of credit for a couple of million at my bank. You just draw upon it as needed. If that runs out, I'll put in another couple of million. Sam, we also need to discuss things like the interest rate and the repayment schedule," Daniel insisted. There was a pause, and then Sam exploded. "You dumb shit. You insult me. Me, you stupid prick. Interest repayment. If you were here I'd break your neck. Well, maybe not me, but I'd have one of my goons try." He chuckled. Daniel laughed. "Okay, Sam, settle down. We'll discuss that later. I'm sure to see you in person within the next couple of months. Anyway, I'm serious, Tim. If it weren't for you I wouldn't be here. I owe you everything. I told you a long time ago, whatever you need, you have to call Sam. Please, Tim, remember that," Sam pleaded. "Thanks, Sam. I appreciate it," Daniel replied, his voice quiet. They swiftly wrapped up the conversation, making plans to catch up in person soon. Glancing at the clock, Daniel realized most of the morning had slipped away. He buzzed his intercom, summoning Olivia, his secretary, into his office. "Hi, Olivia. Take a seat, please." Daniel greeted her, studying her closely as she settled in. Daniel was a nice-looking 40-something-year-old divorced mother of 2. She had been working for Daniel for over 6 years now, and he had more than a bit of respect for her abilities. "Olivia, do you remember when I first interviewed you for this job?" Olivia nodded and said, "You thought I was overqualified because I had a master's in business management from the Wharton School. I told you that I wanted a position that would give me the time to spend with my growing children. And that money was not my primary objective. My ex was providing a nice home and child support, right?" Daniel replied, "I have a proposition for you. Please relax and let me explain. Back in Vegas, Emily and Rachel, I really drank too much last night. I feel awful now," Emily confessed with a chuckle. "But you know what? I think it did me some good. I might do it again tonight. We both had a bit too much fun." Rachel chuckled. "We're lucky some of the guys we danced with didn't push it further. Maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. Huh. Remember, what goes down here stays here," Rachel whispered. Earlier that night, later, Rachel stumbled upon Emily waiting in the lounge. "Hey, Emily," Rachel started hesitantly. "I hope you won't be upset. I bumped into someone today and he invited me to dinner. I'm heading to the dining room to meet him in a bit." "That's fantastic, Rachel. I'm happy for you," Emily cheered. "No need to worry about me. I'll grab a meal, enjoy a couple of drinks, and then hit the sack." "Enjoy your dinner, Rachel." "I mean it," Rachel grinned. "Well, I have a few minutes, so I'll join you for a drink. Don't want him thinking I'm too eager." Suddenly a male voice boomed above them. Well, looky here, 2 beautiful women sitting all alone. That's criminal." The girls looked up startled. Emily replied, "What the hell are you doing here? Where do you think I'd be?" I'm a liquor salesman. I get to Vegas 1 weekend a month. That way I can take care of everyone here in one shot. And it leaves me the weekdays to service the local trade." "But what are you gals doing here?" Gregory Thompson asked. "Just a weekend away, Walt," Rachel replied. "This time, just a few days away for a break by ourselves." Emily regretted giving him that information. By yourselves. Then surprised. Emily, Timmy Boyd let you go to Vegas by yourself. I always thought he was a wimp, but I didn't think he was that stupid. Thompson laughed. Emily's face tensed, her tone firm as she retorted, mind your words, Walt. I won't stand for you disparaging Tim. Thompson's demeanor shifted immediately to regret. Oh, I apologize, Emily. I messed up. Sometimes I'm a real idiot. I genuinely am sorry. I'll make it right with Tim when we return. You both are good folks. Emily smiled, feeling gratified by Thompson's response to her confrontation. Perhaps he wasn't exactly the person she had initially perceived him to be. He was certainly good-looking. Rachel hesitated and looked at her watch. Emily saw her unease and quickly reassured her. You had better get going, Rachel. We'll have a good time. I'll be fine. Go. Rachel arose and said, I'll see you in our room later, Emily. Okay, sure, don't worry. Have a good time. Emily smiled at her. They watched as Rachel walked swiftly across the lounge and into the large lobby. Thompson turned to Emily. Please believe me, I really am sorry. Okay. Emily shook her head and smiled at him. Okay, Walt, but no more cracks. Do you understand? Absolutely. I will make sure that I'm on my best behavior. Now please accept my invitation for dinner. I hate eating alone, and I'm sure you feel the same. There's a great little Chinese restaurant in the hotel, and I would be tickled pink if you would be my guest. Emily hesitated a bit and then shrugged her shoulders. All right, Walt, remember, though, your best behavior. Emily was pleasantly surprised at how much she enjoyed Gregory Thompson's company. He was attentive, complimented her, and made her laugh. Dinner ended too quickly, and Thompson suggested continuing the night in the lounge for drinks and dancing. Leaning in closer, Thompson gently grasped her hand. Emily, it's still pretty early. What do you say we head back to the lounge for a few drinks? I'll dazzle you with my dance moves. I'm practically Broadway material, he quipped with a playful grin. Emily chuckled and agreed, finding Thompson entertaining and oddly appealing. The following hours drifted by in a pleasant blur. Emily found herself indulging more than usual, enjoying the company and feeling a pleasant buzz settle in. She knew she should refuse more liquor, but she was having fun, and Thompson was a great dancer. Snuggling into him on the dance floor, Emily whispered, Is that a banana in your pocket, or are you just glad to see me? Emily, she giggled uncontrollably. Gee, I'm sorry, Walt, I can't help it. You're so damn gorgeous and sexy. A guy would have to be a saint not to get hard dancing with you, he chuckled. She moved back into him. Oh, no, you don't. I like that, Walt. You feel huge. She moved her crotch against his erection, feeling herself becoming more aroused. They continued dancing with Thompson's hands on her ass, rubbing and caressing. Emily had her hands behind his head and found herself kissing him passionately. Emily, whispered Thompson, let's go up to my room. It's quieter and more private. He led her out of the lounge and into the elevators. Emily staggered along the hallway with Thompson holding her up. GM, I think that you're just a little tipsy. You're a real party animal, he cleared. Emily giggled again, and they entered his room. Things escalated quickly as clothes were shed, and they engaged in intimate acts. Later on, Emily had a sudden moment of clarity, comprehending the weight of her choices. In a rush, she left, leaving a smug Thompson behind. Meanwhile, Daniel wrapped up a hastily made dinner on Saturday evening, finding himself in the den with a newspaper he had no desire to read. It struck him that Emily hadn't made any effort to reach out since she left on Friday morning. An inquiry with the hotel confirmed that there were no guests registered under the names of Emily or her companions. Daniel wasn't taken aback by this revelation. As emotions surged within him, Daniel felt an alien, sickening emptiness. His marriage seemed to have reached a critical point, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it was over. The indifference and patronizing attitude Emily had developed over the years had eroded their connection. If she had indeed been unfaithful, the marriage might not survive, and a part of Daniel would die with it. The phone's ringing interrupted his thoughts and he answered it. Hearing Mark's voice on the other end, Mark confirmed Daniel's suspicions, reporting that Emily had been involved with Gregory Thompson, a known player in the area. Mark offered support and advised him not to do anything irrational. Daniel couldn't immediately respond. Emotions overwhelmed him. The confirmation of Emily's infidelity and the involvement of Thompson were gut-wrenching revelations. Mark urged him to take time, fix himself a drink, and promise to keep the information safe in a stunned stupor. Daniel shuddered and held onto his chair's arms, tears streaming down his face. He felt a profound sense of sadness and desolation. The woman he loved had cruelly betrayed him, and he grappled with the pain. Anger replaced shock. Daniel found himself consumed by vengeful thoughts directed at Thompson, entertaining dark notions of retribution. But in that moment, a startling realization washed over him, a resurgence of his buried lethal instincts threatening to take hold. Recognizing the perilous path he was treading, Daniel fought against his reawakened violent nature. He forced himself to remember the person he had worked hard to become, staunchly refusing to regress despite the crushing reality of his fractured marriage sinking in. Acknowledging the grim truth, Daniel grappled with the necessity of making tough choices and accepting that his marriage was irreparably broken. He couldn't bear the thought of sleeping in the bed he had shared with Emily. He packed his belongings, made hotel reservations, and decided to face Emily when she returned. Emily and Rachel shared the plane trip home in relative silence. Rachel had exploded when she discovered Emily's lapse of judgment, and they had quarreled bitterly. Rachel finally turned to Emily as the plane was descending to land and gently took her hand. "Look, Em, let's not destroy our friendship. I will stand by you no matter what you decide. You do realize that the days ahead are not going to be pleasant." "I know." Emily sighed heavily. "Look, as I said before, I was drunk, so I made a mistake. I hate what I've done, but it happened and I have to accept that. What Tim doesn't know won't hurt him. It's not like I have much of a sex life with him anyway." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "You're not going to tell him, then? You know that I won't say anything. But what if he finds out sometime in the future? It could be even worse then." No, let's not start arguing again. Just think about it." After a tense silence, Janet took charge, fetching her car once they disembarked. She drove Emily home, the air heavy with unspoken tension, bidding farewell with a hug and a quiet kiss. "Wishing you all the best," Janet whispered as Emily made her way up the front path, dragging her suitcase along. Emily shook her head, a mix of emotions crossing her face, but she straightened her posture and raised her head high as she pushed open the door and stepped into the house. Inside, Daniel sat in his familiar easy chair, casting a glance at her arrival. "Hi, honey, did you miss me?" She smiled bravely. "We had a blast, but it's good to be home." Daniel just gazed at her coldly. "Sit down. I want to hear all about your trip. What did you do that was such a blast?" While he spoke softly, there was a force in his voice that Emily had not heard before. She quailed briefly but gathered herself together quickly. "I'm tired, Daniel. I want to get into a shower and change into something more comfortable. I'll tell you all about the trip later. You're going nowhere. I told you to sit down. Now put your ass in that chair or I will get up and put you down," Daniel threatened, his world spinning around him. "What the heck is the matter with you? I just told you that I'm tired. We'll talk later. And if you don't like that, then we won't talk at all," she blazed. Daniel was on his feet in a second and was suddenly nose to nose with her. "I have never laid a hand on you in anger, but if you don't sit, I will smack the heck out of your rear end till it looks like mashed potato," he snarled. With a sudden move, his hand landed firmly on her chest, gently but insistently pressing her down onto the chair. A heavy sigh escaped his lips as he commanded, "Go back to where you were sitting." Emily froze, feeling a mix of shock and confusion. This wasn't the Daniel she knew. His actions were completely out of character. Trying to make sense of it, she assumed he must be upset about her spending time with her friends. She stayed seated, staring at him, utterly bewildered and unsure of what to do next. "Okay, Emily, now tell me all about your trip and the blast that you had." "For Pete's sake," Daniel began. "We just let our hair down. We drank a bit too much. We gambled and lost a little too much. Just things like that. We saw a few shows and had a few great meals. It was nothing terribly exciting, but it was nice getting away." "Getting away from what, Emily?" Daniel asked gently. "Getting away from me," Emily snapped. "I don't know what you're driving at. I'm tired, and I don't want to play your silly games." With that, she started to rise. "Sit down, Emily. We're not finished, not by a long shot." Daniel snapped back at her. "Emily, spill it out. How many guys have you sneaked around with, huh? How many times did you betray me?" Daniel's rage painted his face pale. Emily's eyes widened, a rush of fear flooding her veins. She couldn't fathom how much he knew or if it was all just his suspicions running wild. Her mind raced, pondering whether this was some figment of his imagination, or if there was something he'd discovered. She attacked, perhaps in a desperate attempt to deny what she had done. "You're out of your mind, you jerk. How dare you accuse me of cheating or being unfaithful? Have you been drinking? What's gotten into you, you idiot?" she asked. Daniel suddenly smiled. "You're not only an adulteress, but a liar as well. And I have to admit, a pretty good one. I imagine that you've had quite a bit of practice lying to me over the past few years." "I know, Emily. I know all about your tryst with Thompson in Vegas. You're such a stupid jerk. You actually thought you could be with him there and get away with it. How many times have you been with him in the past? Emily, how many other men have you been with?" Emily shook her head, stunned that she had been found out and shaken by her husband's confrontation. She silently berated herself for her foolishness, her stupidity. Daniel paused, seemingly, and thought, "What I really don't understand is how I ever thought that I loved you. I guess that I did at one time, but the last couple of years convinced me that the woman I loved had vanished, replaced by a heroine and a slut. You want Thompson? Fine, you can have him, Emily, or anyone else you fancy. No need to worry about hiding it from your husband because pretty soon you won't have one. Daniel's words cut through the air, leaving Emily trembling and pale. She was petrified, seeing a side of Daniel she never knew existed. His anger, coldness, and biting words painted a chilling picture of a new Daniel standing before her, unrecognizable from the man she once knew. Please, Daniel, she pleaded. Please at least listen to me. I screwed up, I made a mistake, I know that. But you can't just throw away our years together. I swear that this was the only time I was unfaithful. I didn't mean for it to happen, I swear. She implored, tears now escaping from her eyes, Daniel staring at her with disgust evident on his face. It's not only your adultery with Thompson that convinced me to rid myself of you, although that was the deciding factor. You were disloyal, Emily, and you knew how important loyalty is to me. You betrayed everything that I believed in. Without loyalty and trust, no relationship can survive. Also, the past couple of years have been an ordeal. You've shown no respect for me and little consideration. You've made me feel like an unwelcome visitor, almost a stranger you merely put up with. Daniel continued, his voice now devoid of warmth. You know what the real issue is, Emily. You started mixing up true masculinity with machismo. Your idea of a man became warped, tangled with misconceptions. I've said it over and over, a booming voice, a boastful demeanor, and muscles don't define what it means to be a man. I also told you that violence was almost never the answer to a problem. But you considered me weak and timid. You had forgotten that a real man has no need to brag or put someone down. A real man has a sense of responsibility, a sense of obligation to his loved ones. A real man protects and provides for his family. A real man is true and loyal to his family and his friends. A real man needs to be more than a large cock and a big mouth, but those seem to be the things that have attracted you. Emily sat stunned, in shock. She was literally speechless. Daniel had never, in their years together, talked to her in such a manner with such revulsion and bitterness. Daniel, please, Emily pleaded, but Daniel snapped back, cutting her off. Shut it, Emily. You've got nothing worth saying. No more lies. I won't buy them. I've already packed up most of my things. The rest, I'll sort it out. You know why? Because there's not much here that's mine. Nearly everything we got in the past years was what you thought we needed. I hope that those things will comfort you. I also suggest that you find an attorney. The divorce will go through quickly and smoothly. If you don't decide to fight me on this, I will also provide for you so that your lifestyle won't change too much. But I suspect that you'll need to find gainful employment. One caveat, Emily, you'll get to keep this house. But if I find that you've brought men here to be with, I'll stop all agreed upon support. I won't make mortgage payments on a place where you engage in such behavior. If you fight me on this, I'll just use the evidence I have of you and Thompson. So it's your decision. Daniel rose and looked down upon her with a sense of sadness and regret. It's really a shame, Emily. We could have grown old together. And with that he turned and walked out of the house and out of her life. The next few months went by quickly for Daniel. He had a business that he had to get powered up, and he thanked his lucky stars that he had Olivia working alongside in her new capacity as Director of Human Resources. With her ceaseless dedication and expertise, she made an immense impact. Soon enough, they formed a solid core team, and potential clients began showing tentative interest. The divorce proceedings glided smoothly, despite Emily's persistent attempts to reach out, all of which Daniel turned down. The finalization only took a few months. Daniel maintained contact with his daughter, Amanda, conversing with her frequently from the day he moved out. She kept reminding him that her mother was distraught and frantic to do anything that could lead to a reconciliation. Daniel patiently explained to her that that was out of the question, until finally she gave up trying. Daniel promised to keep in touch with her and did remember to call her every week. Daniel was in his office when a messenger left a large brown envelope with Kim as the new secretary. Daniel, you have a FedEx delivery from Doug Klein. Shall I bring it in? She asked through the intercom. Daniel asked what it was. His attorney had phoned the day before. He felt a chill run through him and told him to bring it in after she left. He sat and just looked at the envelope, not opening it, not touching it. The package held the conclusive paperwork, announcing his newfound status as a single man, the official dissolution of his marriage. As he sat in silence, he confronted his emotions. The arrival of these documents stirred up a torrent of feelings he believed he'd buried. Sadness consumed him, wrapping him in its heavy cloak. An overwhelming emptiness settled in, leaving behind a void he couldn't seem to fill. He had also come to realize that Emily's alienation was at least in part due to his own unwillingness to confront her concerning the changes that were taking place. He should never have allowed that change in attitude, never should have allowed the coolness that had soon characterized their relationship. Perhaps if he had been more forceful with her, the whole mess could have been avoided. But in the end, it was her decision. She was a grown woman and she knew the consequences of what she had done. Anyway, Daniel reasoned, that was in the past. He now had to look to the future. What Daniel didn't realize was that as he had received the final divorce papers, so had Emily. They were delivered through the mail from her attorney 2 days after Daniel had received his copy. She had sat at the kitchen table and just looked at the envelope, not touching it or opening it. She knew what was contained therein. Her face sagged and tears again came to her eyes. She blinked them back and tried to compose herself. She still couldn't bring herself to accept the destruction of her marriage. She knew that she loved him and would always love him. She grappled with the realization that her own choices led her to this juncture. Yet, despite racking her brain, she couldn't conjure up a single untested solution. She needed something, anything, to change the course. Meanwhile, Daniel hadn't overlooked Gregory Thompson. Several months post the official decree, he made a decision. He started frequenting the bar where Thompson made occasional appearances. It was within walking distance of his office. He would stop by for a drink after work and was soon a recognized visitor. A few weeks went by and one early evening, Daniel could hear loud and raucous voices coming from the side room of the facility. He thought he recognized Thompson's loud and arrogant voice. "Hell, I've been with half a dozen married women the last few months. They're all whores when it comes right down to it." He laughed. He had his coterie with him, and they encouraged him and laughed with him. Daniel had moved over to the entrance of the room and looked in. Thompson immediately saw and recognized him. He leered with glee. Well, looky here. How's it going, Daniel? Emily finally kicked your ass out, did she?" "Yes. You couldn't measure up after me, could you?" He laughed obscenely. "What makes you think any woman would want someone like you, Greg? A toy would be a better bet." Daniel spat out, his words measured and precise, fixating his gaze on his target. "I get it. You can't even get your little soldier to stand at attention half the time. Why, you little jerk, I'll teach you to respect your betters." Gregory roared and came after Daniel. What happened was almost too quick for the eye to follow, but Thompson suddenly found himself propelled back into a table which collapsed under his weight. He pulled himself up now with fire and hatred in his eyes. He had an empty beer bottle in his hand and anger in his heart. "Jerk, I'll make you regret that," Thompson muttered angrily. Unnoticed by the bystanders, a faint smile graced Daniel's lips as Thompson lunged once more. Seconds later, Thompson lay sprawled on the floor. Later medical examinations revealed a grim list of injuries: a fractured spine, a broken pelvis, a ruptured spleen, and severe damage to his testicles. A call to 911 summoned both an ambulance and the police to the scene. It was soon determined that Daniel had acted in self-defense, and there would be no charges. After the hubbub died down and the police had finished their questions, Daniel arose and left the bar for home. He felt good, not because he had caused harm to Thompson, but because he had not lost control and had not killed him as he could have easily done. Perhaps there were times when a little bit of violence is the answer to a problem, he thought to himself in amusement. Additional months slid by and Daniel's company continued to prosper. Daniel had made very sure that he hired only the very best people with outstanding expertise in the field, and he rewarded them accordingly. He also ensured that all of his clients were treated respectfully, with fairness, and always with their best interests in mind. Discovering the keys to business success wasn't as convoluted as he thought. Offer exceptional services, set fair prices, and strive to earn client loyalty. His mantra proved effective, leading him to helm a remarkably prosperous enterprise. Yet, despite this triumph, an unsettling truth lingered. He couldn't find happiness or contentment. He either refused or couldn't muster the courage to delve into the root cause of his discontent. He refused to dwell upon that. A single life lost love. He never told anyone. I guess he never will. Dear listener, if you have reached this far, please click on the subscribe button. It will be a great help. But in the end, it was her decision. She was a grown woman and she knew the consequences of what she had done. Anyway, Daniel reasoned, that was in the past. He now had to look to the future. What Daniel didn't realize was that as he had received the final divorce papers, so had Emily. They were delivered through the mail from her attorney 2 days after Daniel had received his copy. She had sat at the kitchen table and just looked at the envelope, not touching it or opening it. She knew what was contained therein. Her face sagged and tears again came to her eyes. She blinked them back and tried to compose herself. She still couldn't bring herself to accept the destruction of her marriage. She knew that she loved him and would always love him. She grappled with the realization that her own choices led her to this juncture. Yet despite racking her brain, she couldn't conjure up a single untested solution. She needed something, anything, to change the course. Meanwhile, Daniel hadn't overlooked Gregory Thompson. Several months post the official decree, he made a decision. He started frequenting the bar where Thompson made occasional appearances. It was within walking distance of his office. He would stop by for a drink after work and was soon a recognized visitor. A few weeks went by, and one early evening, Daniel could hear loud and raucous voices coming from the side room of the facility. He thought he recognized Thompson's loud and arrogant voice. "Hell, I've been with half a dozen married women the last few months. They're all whores when it comes right down to it." He laughed. He had his coterie with him, and they encouraged him and laughed with him. Daniel had moved over to the entrance of the room and looked in. Thompson immediately saw and recognized him. He leered with glee. Well, looky here. How's it going, Daniel? Emily finally kicked your ass out, did she?" "Yes. You couldn't measure up after me, could you?" He laughed obscenely. "What makes you think any woman would want someone like you, Greg? A toy would be a better bet." Daniel spat out, his words measured and precise, fixating his gaze on his target. "I get it. You can't even get your little soldier to stand at attention half the time. Why, you little jerk, I'll teach you to respect your betters." Gregory roared and came after Daniel. What happened was almost too quick for the eye to follow, but Thompson suddenly found himself propelled back into a table which collapsed under his weight. He pulled himself up now with fire and hatred in his eyes. He had an empty beer bottle in his hand, and anger in his heart. "Jerk, I'll make you regret that," Thompson muttered angrily. Unnoticed by the bystanders, a faint smile graced Daniel's lips as Thompson lunged once more. Seconds later, Thompson lay sprawled on the floor. Later, medical examinations revealed a grim list of injuries: a fractured spine, a broken pelvis, a ruptured spleen, and severe damage to his testicles. A call to 911 summoned both an ambulance and the police to the scene. It was soon determined that Daniel had acted in self-defense, and there would be no charges. After the hubbub died down and the police had finished their questions, Daniel arose and left the bar for home. He felt good, not because he had caused harm to Thompson, but because he had not lost control and had not killed him as he could have easily done. Perhaps there were times when a little bit of violence is the answer to a problem, he thought to himself in amusement. Additional months slid by, and Daniel's company continued to prosper. Daniel had made very sure that he hired only the very best people with outstanding expertise in the field, and he rewarded them accordingly. He also ensured that all of his clients were treated respectfully with fairness and always with their best interests in mind. Discovering the keys to business success wasn't as convoluted as he thought. Offer exceptional services, set fair prices, and strive to earn client loyalty. His mantra proved effective, leading him to helm a remarkably prosperous enterprise. Yet despite this triumph, an unsettling truth lingered. He couldn't find happiness or contentment. He either refused or couldn't muster the courage to delve into the root cause of his discontent. He refused to dwell upon that, a single life lost love. He never told anyone.